Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Over the Cap podcast. It's January 27th, 2024, and this is Jason Fitzgerald. You can find me on X at Jason_OTC. Or you can email me, jason@overthecap.com. I know I've been pretty delinquent on emails lately, so hopefully I'll be able to catch up with those things as well. You can also watch the podcast on YouTube. No video tonight, just a screen video. You don't get to see my wonderful face on here. Decided to record in a different spot, and really I was just too lazy to go and get the camera to set up for it. Figured it really doesn't make too much of a difference either way. So we start off this week's podcast on a little bit of a sad note. Nelly the Bunny, who had been the unofficial co-host of the OTC podcast, and just the little mascot or whatever that was there most weeks, unfortunately passed away the other day. So I thought I would tell everybody, since I know Nelly was a fan favorite of the podcast, making noise in the background, begging for treats, and all that stuff. So I thought I would share that with everybody and start off with there. Nelly was getting a little bit older. She was a couple years old when we got her, and we've had her for, I think, close to 4 years. I think about that time frame. So anyway, just wanted to kind of put that out there. Beer of the evening tonight. We'll move on to a little bit better news here. Making my way still through Christmas beers that we've gotten. So now we're moving on to the Clown Shoes 12 Beers of Christmas set that's here. So I'm not sure what we'll be doing. The first one is a one-man holiday Belgian style. Seems to be pretty decent. So not too bad. We'll see how we do going through these tonight. Hopefully it won't be too crazy, because I'm just going in there and just grabbing a couple different things here and there and getting to them. Obviously, it's been a little bit of time since I've been able to do a podcast. I don't think I've done one in 3 weeks now, maybe a little bit longer than that. Just been a little bit busy, and, the football games being on the Saturday night in the playoffs, they make it a little more difficult, because typically the podcast time is going to be Saturdays. Sometimes I'll still do them on a Friday night, but usually we've got stuff going on a Saturday, and I usually try to get in squat day Saturday, so I don't really want to stay up too late and do the drinking on the Saturday if I'm going to be doing squats the next day. Just seems a little counterproductive. So I've been trying to do them on Sundays, and I think on Saturdays. So I think after this week, I think we should be back to a normal schedule, since we're down to the final games here. So hopefully we'll be back on that. I'm sure we'll have some Jacob appearances here coming up and down. He's bouncing back and forth between fortnighting in the basement and, I don't know, having some kind of party with his buddies online at the moment. And I think he was attempting to have a disco party. So if there's any funky sounding music in the background at all, you can just blame that on him. I'll wish my mom a happy birthday. So happy birthday, Mom. I'm sure she'll be listening for, let's see, we are 3 minutes and 28 seconds in. So I'm not sure if she made it that far, but if she did, happy birthday. So it was her birthday just a couple of days ago, yesterday actually. So we'll wish her a happy birthday on the podcast. I don't even really know where to start tonight. Since it's been so long, there's been so many different things with the coaching, with the teams that have been eliminated from the playoffs, and just so much different stuff to kind of go over. I think, maybe just start with the coaching for a little bit. I'm not going to go too much, I don't think, at least, into the coaching aspect of it. I think that when we get into the coaching searches, a lot of it is just it's blind, right? We go into these things and it's like, oh, well, this guy's a can't miss, this guy's a can't miss, this person is a can't miss, and I think we get way too caught up a lot of times with the performance that they've had with one individual player. And, we don't really know how these positional coaches are going to translate. It's a very different skill set. I think a lot of times being the coach of an entire team, an organization, where you've got to deal with so many different things, right? You're dealing with 8 million different personalities. You're dealing with 8 million different media people. You're dealing with owners, you're dealing with all kinds of outside influences. There's just so much stuff that goes on, and you've got to control a whole team. You've got a whole coaching staff that you have to deal with. That can be very, very different from being a coordinator. I think the other thing that goes on a lot of times now is I think there is this rush to find, the next great young head football coach, right? The next McVay or something like that. And I think because there's this rush to get that person, which is usually the youngest coordinator that has recently worked with a quarterback who, is successful. And it's like there's too much of a rush, I think, sometimes to give that person a job. And then the expectations on that person are too high. Obviously there was a lot of development that went into someone like a Josh Allen, right? Josh Allen didn't exactly come into the league, I think, as a finished product. But for a lot of other players, you're giving the credit to a coach. And I think sometimes we're overlooking the fact that that player happens to be really, really good. And because we rush into it, because there's this fear of like losing out on this great young offensive mind that's going to come in and take over your team, you don't really have much of a track record with them to fall back on. And when people talk about, why are there so many offensive coaches that get jobs and the defensive coaches kind of get pushed to the side, I think that's really a big reason why. I think for a defensive coach, a lot of times to get that opportunity, they kind of have to go through years and years and years of having an above average defense. And, defense is not the most stable thing year to year. It's hard to, have great defenses every season. But, the standouts that come from the defense, usually it's more along the lines of, well, this player is great. This player is great. This player is great. And even though we say that about the quarterbacks, a lot of the credit goes to the offensive coordinator. So at least from a standpoint of putting together a functional unit, that's kind of, everything is dependent on circumstance, but something that's a little bit more, I think, independent. I think when we hire the defensive coaches, you have a little bit better of an idea as to at least what they can do on that side of the ball, because there's probably a lot longer of a track record, a lot more of a history to go on. And even if that history is not huge, but let's say it's at least a couple of years, the amount of new pieces that you put in and the different wrinkles that you have to put in to maintain a defense that plays above average, the guy has to be pretty good. All right. When we get to the offensive side, again, we just jump into it a lot of times off a season. And when you're taking a new job, generally you're taking a job that's a terrible roster. You're taking over a terrible team, a terrible franchise, and you're being asked to take this group that's awful and somehow mold it very quickly into being a contender. And, we look at this and we'll say, well, this guy did this with this quarterback and this guy did this with this one. And, he's going to salvage this player and all is going to be wonderful. And then it doesn't happen, right? Because, the physical talent of Josh Allen, only comes across, once in a while. A player like Patrick Mahomes comes across once in a generation. You don't have these guys that just kind of come in all the time and, are going to be great. And you go in there with some of these quarterbacks who just simply are ineffective, and you don't really have that history to dial back to as to, well, how did this guy do, when he's being forced to go in there with kind of like these mid-grade players. And I think it's one of the problems with the way that we hire. And then the other issue with it is that the person gets the job opportunity at a very young age, and then they fail, and it's like it's almost like you don't get an opportunity again. And obviously, some of the people do, right? But a lot of times it's hard. It's hard to get a second opportunity in the NFL, especially if you do really badly. It's hard to rehab your image to the point to where you can get that other head coaching job. And, maybe that one you get a little bit luckier in the draft, or you have a little bit of a better, understanding of what it takes to be a head coach. So, I think that there's a disservice that's being done. And in part, this is probably one of the reasons why I think someone like Mike Vrabel right now doesn't have a job, which really kind of surprises me. But I think when you look at someone like Vrabel, and who knows, maybe he got hired today, and I don't even know about it. But obviously he lasted out there much longer than I thought he would. When he was let go, my thought on it was, why are the Titans not trading him? Like I kind of had an inkling that he was going to go, like before that, but it's like, why aren't they trading him? Like they should be able to get something for him. But I think when you look at Vrabel, I think people look at this and it's like not exciting, right? He's probably not the most, obviously there's certain things with the games, in-game stuff that he's been very good at. I think that some of the stuff that you see with the timeouts and clock management things in the past have been incredibly good. I think Vrabel probably comes across right now as like a boring choice. I think in terms of if you're looking for someone to bring stability to a franchise, if you're looking for someone that can do that, I don't think there's a better coach who's out there than him in terms of just bringing some kind of stability to your organization. If you are a team like the Panthers, who really has just been chaos for the last 2 or 3 years, if you're looking to bring in just something to stabilize it, stop the bleeding, and, go on a path to being relevant, he's a good fit. Now, obviously, they went in a different direction. And, I don't think they even considered him. But that's the kind of team that I'm thinking of there, where you're looking for something. Maybe Atlanta falls into that same category. They've gone in a different direction, too. They've gone in a completely different direction. I think with who they've brought in, I think what they've done does give them that same kind of chance, right? They didn't go like that flashy, offensive mind route or anything like that. But, I think with someone like Vrabel, he's one of these guys where I think every Sunday, his team is probably going to give you the best effort they can. All right, he's going to have them prepared, and they're going to go out there, and they're probably going to give you the best possible outcome that this group can give you. I think he's one of those coaches where if his team is favored, they're probably going to win. If his team is probably an underdog within 3 points, he's got a shot. If his team is an underdog by more than that, they probably don't have a chance. And I think that's kind of what hurts him, right? I think his success in Tennessee, in a lot of ways, was probably doing more with that roster than probably anybody else would have done. Because for the most part, he won when he was supposed to win, but then they would lose in the playoffs. Why? They're not as talented as those other teams. And he's probably not going to give you that advantage that pushes you over the top. I think there's still a handful of coaches in this league that can do that. The guys that pull off those incredible upsets from time to time, that you lean back and say, okay, this coach can do it. I don't think he's there. Maybe he will be one day. I don't think he's there. And I think that's one of the reasons maybe why in this cycle you haven't heard his name that much, or as much as I thought there would be. And, then the other name that's out there is Belichick. And, Belichick is an interesting one. I the more that I thought about it, after he was let go, because your first thought again is, maybe they could have thought about trading him, and it's like, they didn't want to go down that route. They didn't want to waste their time doing that. Didn't think it was necessarily fair to him, though. They would have done it with a player, but that's neither here nor there. But Belichick is not bringing you any long term, right? None. He's 70 years old, 70, how old? It's around 70, right? So it's not like you're bringing in Belichick to build a program. You're bringing in Belichick to come to a team that probably has a very good offense already in place, has had trouble defensively, and has had a head coach that probably makes some stupid decisions during the course of a year. But with the way that we turn over rosters in the NFL and the typical job openings that exist, like, where does Belichick fit in with that? And I can't really come up with any place. I can't come up with a spot where you would say, okay, yeah, this makes sense for, Belichick to go there. Like, people were bringing up Los Angeles, the Chargers. Like, I have no idea why you would think that. Yeah, they've got a terrific quarterback. That roster needs a lot of help. That it's a salary cap. It's not a nightmare, but it could become a nightmare. And it probably will become a nightmare if it becomes a double down situation. So, I don't see where he would have fit in with that. People mentioned Dallas. All right, Dallas probably wouldn't be as tight in the playoffs. Belichick can work with any personnel, but it's not like Dallas's defense was a problem. They went into the playoffs tight. That's on the coach. That's part of it. But, it's not like he's going to fix something. You're just banking on him coming in there and pulling off something different in the playoffs. Maybe the fact is Dallas just isn't good enough. I think when you look at Dallas and everybody wants to fire that coach or wanted to fire the coach, how much better, objectively, how much better is that team going to be with a new head coach? They win, 11 games, 12 games every year. Now, you can come to the point where you're like, okay, they're not getting any better with him, and you need a change for the sake of change. I mean, I guess you could do that. But, fundamentally, it's not going to change anything. Dak Prescott is a good but not great quarterback. And he gets tight in some of these big game situations. I think that's really the bottom line. Now, I wouldn't have expected defensively them to fall apart the way they did. Maybe that's an example of when you're paying too much attention on the the coaching preparation front versus the game preparation front. They were just embarrassed defensively against the Packers in that game. But it's not a team that you look at, I think, on offense and you say that this is this great offensive unit, right? It's a very good offensive line that's has some issues with age and injuries. It's an above average but not elite quarterback. And it's one terrific wide receiver and then some guys. Michael Gallup is not a great player. Brandon Cooks is probably a little bit more of a specialist at this point in time. Tony Pollard is whatever. You look at those players. Ferguson at tight end. It's not like this is a team of all-stars everywhere. They're a good team, but I wouldn't look at them as like this great, amazing team. And I wouldn't have made a move to Belichick there. And Atlanta bringing him in, like, I don't know what Atlanta was even thinking with that. Like, Atlanta's roster is no good. They played a terrible division, but what would you look at there and say, oh yeah, Belichick will fix this? Belichick's post Tom Brady has been terrible. Now, that's not to say that Belichick's success is all Tom Brady, and I think one of the unfortunate things, because I'm not sure if he's going to coach again. I think one of the unfortunate things for him is he's going to be criticized very, very unfairly with people saying he couldn't win without Brady. And the fact was, at least 2 of the first 3 Super Bowls that they won, he won those without the guy you think is Tom Brady. Those Super Bowls that were won in 2001 and 2003 were not quarterbacked by the Tom Brady that you all know as a Super Bowl MVP. They were quarterbacked by a guy that managed a football game. They were quarterbacked by a guy who, at that point in time, it was a debate. Well, who's better, Tom Brady or Chad Pennington? I mean, it's ridiculous in hindsight. But it's not like Brady was going out there throwing for 4,000 yards and, slinging the ball all over the football field. They played to just do enough. They played to weather conditions in December and January. They played these games, to where they were winning. I'm not saying in spite of the quarterback, but they were winning around what were limitations in a quarterback, I think, at the time. And, Brady is one of these. Brady is probably the greatest success story in the NFL in terms of an actual, career development arc. I think if you go and you look at Brady's, history as a player, where this crazy peak, it starts in 2004, and at that point he's, 5th year in the league. That's really where he starts kind of morphing into this much, much better player. But, he hits this amazing peak when they bring in Randy Moss. And you've got this group now of Randy Moss and Wes Welker and, the tight ends come in and, later Julian Edelman and, whomever else. And then, Brady just becomes a surgeon out there. Just, incredible. And the second half of Belichick's run is probably very much Tom Brady dependent. But those first Super Bowls were not. And I'm not saying he would have won them with Drew Bledsoe. I'm not saying he would have won them with somebody else. But I think he's going to get too much. He's not going to get enough credit for that part of the career when he really should. I think the other thing with Belichick, and, I think he was the guy, whether it happened on purpose or not, I think he was the guy that understood the consequences of screwing yourself with the salary cap in that era probably better than anybody else in the league. When people kind of talk about playing chess instead of checkers, that kind of stuff, that was kind of him. And now he wasn't the only one, right? Philadelphia, they knew what they were doing. San Francisco kind of knew what they were doing. There were other teams, but I think Belichick saw, what happened when the salary cap came in, right? So in the early 90s, you had these teams in Dallas and San Francisco, maybe Denver to some extent, maybe Green Bay to a little extent, but really it's Dallas, San Francisco, and then Denver. You're talking a much older quarterback in Denver. But, you're talking about these teams where you looked at Dallas and it was like, this is a dynasty that should never end. And instead, it was like a 4-year run. It was a great 4-year run, 5-year run, whatever it was. It was off the charts, right? 3 Super Bowls, probably should have been a 4th. San Francisco gets the one that's in there. San Francisco is that team that just can never get past Dallas. The one year they do, and they clobber San Diego in the Super Bowl. which is one of the worst Super Bowl teams ever. Not the San Francisco, the San Diego one. Those teams became decimated by the salary cap. Dallas's bazillion dollars in the triplets and Dion and, San Francisco's, ventures into certain types of contracts and, Denver's trying to manipulate the salary cap. I think they were one of the first teams to kind of get in trouble for stuff with a couple of things they did with some of their deals. These are teams that, look like they should have been great for longer periods of time. And Denver was very good for a long period. And so, San Francisco was too, with, even as they moved off of Young and they moved into Jeff Garcia there. But these are all teams that didn't maintain what, I think what you would have thought in the 80s probably would have been like a 10-year run of constantly being division round, championship round, Super Bowl teams. And I think he saw that, and, he took a very different approach to what he did. I think he looked at it like free agency shouldn't be looked at as a way that we get worse. Like, we're worried about losing our players to free agency. That was the worry, right? Well, you can't keep a team together because of free agency. No. It's that we can utilize free agency to get better by making those hard decisions and allowing our better free agents to go somewhere else. And they're going to be overpaid, and they're going to, in the long term, probably damage those other franchises, which they did more often than not. And then Belichick will go and re-sign him for the minimum years later, after they get cut. But I think he understood that, or at least came into it, in a way that nobody else did. And, maybe some of that was ownership based, knowing that his budget in New England is very low compared to a lot of other teams in the NFL. The Patriots are a low spending football team. Their last couple of years especially, they've been pretty low with the exception of the 1 year where they just went wild in free agency, which was a disaster. But they're a relatively low spending team. No different than Kansas City. No different than a couple of other teams in the NFL that have been successful. But if you are going to be limited by a budget, you have to operate sometimes differently. So maybe you can say he was forced to do it. I don't think that's really the main consideration there, but he just got it better than everybody else. I know I've shared this story before, but I know when I listened to Bill Polian talk, and he was giving his thoughts on the salary cap a day or two before I gave mine. That was funny. But he was giving his thoughts on stuff. And, his thoughts on it, which was from that generation, I think this was the prevalent thought. It was as long, this is probably not the exact quote, but it's pretty close. It was, as long as I know that I have the money to make Peyton, Marvin, Reggie, and Dwight happy, I can fill out the rest of my team with whomever. That doesn't work. Yeah, the quarterback does. All right, the quarterback, you got to keep your quarterback. when he's Peyton Manning, you keep your quarterback. But when it comes to everybody else, sometimes you have to make those decisions to move on. And despite the fact that they had that money to keep those core guys there, the minute Peyton went down, their team was awful. Terrible. Just a terrible team. Despite the fact that they had some of these star players on the team. That's beyond the Marvin Harrison era. But, having these star players on the team, they weren't even competitive. So Belichick looked at it like, okay, look, there's a number that I am happy to keep Richard Seymour. There's a number I'm happy to keep Randy Moss. They want more than that number, don't let the door hit you on the way out. And that was the theory that he had. And he knew that he could go into free agency and he could find guys that are Belichick type guys. Might not have known him, might not have ever met him, just met him in passing, whatever it was. But he knew that the way that they worked, that they would probably fit in. And, I think what happened was he would go in there, he'd go into free agency. You'd see these guys who were one-time stars get cut from a team, because the team started to play lousy, salary cap considerations, they're getting released. Or, maybe they're free agents coming off a second contract even. Flashes those rings and says, look, we can't pay you a lot, but I'm going to give you the opportunity to win a championship, complete your career. Because your career is not really going to be complete until you play in a Super Bowl. You've made your money, but, you haven't played in a Super Bowl, have you? You haven't been on a team that's been any good. You've barely been to the playoffs. You're going to make more money elsewhere. But, if you want to come here and compete, go and do it. And you can sign 2 or 3 guys that way versus just having one. And, I think that was what he did incredibly well, was bringing those types of players in. And it was finding those diamonds in the rough that the other teams had kind of, looked down on. Finding roles for them in New England that they could do. Now, he did that and was real successful until he wasn't. And I think that's where the game passes you by sometimes. And I think Belichick kept that same attitude towards the end of Tom Brady's run and after Tom Brady's run. And he, sorry, I'm getting text from my daughter here. He had them after Tom Brady's run and that tail end. The problem was, the player in the NFL has changed because the NFL has changed, right? Belichick going into, say, 2013, 2014, 2015, and he, obviously, there's a lot of misses in there too, right? Your Dalius Thomas, Chad Johnson, Sean Ellis, okay, those are all misses. You're not going to get everything right. But I think one of the things is when you went in that old CBA and you've got these players, people like to use that for, this guy's a dog. This guy's he's a dog when he's out there. When you go through these, you're there in these off-season programs. Then you're there for OTAs. Then you're doing 2-a-days in training camp. You're playing in preseason games. You've got these hard-hitting practices. That's a mindset that I don't think exists for the most part in today's league because the players haven't experienced it, right? That they just haven't. And I think when you got to that later part of the decade, I think some of that stuff that Belichick could probably pull from, that type of player and player attitude might not have existed to the extent that it did before. There's certainly still players like that. It's not to say that there aren't. But I think it's a little bit more limited in number, which makes it a little bit more difficult for someone like him to go in there and do that. I think the second thing is that, when players get cut nowadays, all your good players get extended. Like nobody slips through the cracks anymore. I feel like the last player to slip through the cracks was Sue. And that was a salary cap thing. But, nobody really does unless you go out there and trade. And, that costs you too much. And you saw Bill made terrible trades towards the end when they had desperately traded away a 2 for Sanu. One of the worst trades you could imagine. But, when players get released more often than not, it's because they can't play anymore. And I think those types of players for him to find, and he still would find guys, obviously every now and then. But, there's only so many old guys you can throw out there on a team and still be effective. And, that's what he was trying to do. And that got away from him. But, that run that he had from like 2001 to, I don't even know what year you want to say. I'd probably have to go look it up. But just in terms of the planning and the way he manipulated stuff, and I think was just at a different level, even as a general manager, I think with his approach to roster building, it was just far and away, the most consistent probably in the league. He was just right up there. So I kind of hope that now that his career is probably done, that this does not become like he was great, but he couldn't do it without Brady. I just hope it doesn't become that, because, he just did some incredible things there, with just so much stuff. I know we're going off on a Belichick tangent here, but he was just I think really special in that regard. And just like anything else, over time the league catches up with you, and that's what happened. With him. As for some of these other guys, going back to like Dallas, and obviously he has won before, but, sometimes you do make these changes for the sake of making changes. I don't think Pete Carroll was in that case. I think they saw that, this is time for another facelift there, and Carroll's also pretty old. Doesn't look it, but he is. He's been around for a long time. He was a head coach. I was in high school, and I'm pretty old. So, he's had a very long run, in the league. And I think that was one that did that. But, there's other things where you can talk about sticking with a coach. Now, I'm not talking about sticking with a coach like the Jets head coach who wins 6 games, 7 games, 5 games. No, I'm talking about guys who consistently do pretty well. While there are always knocks on those coaches that they can't win a big one, those knocks are only there until they get lucky enough to do it. Because playoffs, a lot of playoffs are crapshoot. A lot of it is dumb luck, right? Like Andy Reid couldn't win the big one until he finally did. Now you look at Andy Reid and go, well, he can't lose. Andy Reid in Philadelphia could never win the big one, ever. They would always lose when they were supposed to win. Almost always, when it came to the playoffs. They were in a weak NFC, and they would never advance to the Super Bowl until they finally did, and then they lost to the Patriots. And the Patriots were a much better team. They should have lost to the Patriots, but, that's just the way things went. Bill Cowher never won in the playoffs, ever. They would always be successful in the regular season. A lot of times get home field advantage. And then they would lose at some point in the playoffs. Tony Dungy. Great teams in Tampa. Couldn't win. Bringing Gruden. Gruden wins that first year. Probably more dumb luck than anything else. Then Gruden kind of runs that team into the ground, but, couldn't win. Dungy goes to Indianapolis. What happens? They can't win. They can't beat the Patriots till they finally win one. And then it's like, oh, well, when Cowher retired, every year it was, oh, you got to bring in Cowher to rebuild your team. Oh, he'd be the best coach in the world for the Giants. Coaches like that. Now, obviously, he's got the track record when people are talking about bringing him in. You don't survive most of the time in New York if that's your track record, if that's your run. of like, almost there, almost there, almost there, almost there, almost there, almost there. But, eventually you can get there. It's kind of the Vrabel thing, I think. Eventually you probably get there. Because you've the first thing you have to be able to do is find ways to win in the regular season. But, a lot of these guys didn't. And then they finally win. And it's like, oh, well, yeah, of course, the legendary coaches. And poor Marty Schottenheimer, he never wins, right? He is like always the bridesmaid, never the bride. Like he just could never do it. Which is too bad. That he had such a great career. But that's the other end of it, right? You've got the one end are these guys who did break through, and then the other end is guys who don't. So I think you can be patient with the coaches that are showing you some level of competence, year over year, that, eventually maybe you can break through. These other guys who just, we buy too much into these one season things. Drives me nuts. Even for the teams in the playoffs this year, this is, and I hate this. I hate it with a passion every year. All right. Will Houston be a good football team next year? I don't know. Yeah, the quarterback looks the part. Yeah, they got a couple of players there. Playing a terrible division. I don't know. The coach had a great rookie campaign, so do lots of coaches. The Green Bay Packers, they have a terrific coach, I think. Jordan Love looked great in the second half of the season. Carson Wentz has looked great for a half a season. Ryan Fitzpatrick multiple times has looked great for a half a season. I don't know if he's going to be any good next year. Every year in the playoffs, you get these teams that come in there and they do something. They're competitive in a loss. They have an upset win. And the TV hosts all do the same thing. They're going to be good for a long time. They'll be back. Don't worry. They'll be back. I'm still waiting for Mark Sanchez to get back. I'm still waiting for Blake Bortles to get back. I'm still waiting on those guys. I'm still waiting on all these teams that I heard this about, that they'll be back. Like, they'll be back where? Like, on the field next year? Yeah, they'll be back on the field next year. There's not that level of continuity in the NFL until you've got, like, a superstar at quarterback. You get a superstar at quarterback, you've got a good shot. And it's still no guarantee. Right? The Saints went 3 years in a row without going to the playoffs with Drew Brees. With Drew Brees, I mean. At the peak of his career. I'm not talking about the Drew Brees that was having trouble throwing the football at the end. I'm talking about the Drew Brees at the, in the prime of his career. They went, 7-9, 3 years in a row? That was salary cap issues, injury issues, everything under the sun. But nothing in the NFL is guaranteed. And that's why, to me at least, these losses in the playoffs are pretty devastating. Because there's no guarantee you're going to be back again. No matter how much somebody wants to pat you on the back and say, you're a hell of a team. You're rooting for a hell of a team. They're really good. And they're so young. They're always just going to be back. Man, they're going to be hard out next year. They're going to be a hard out. Maybe one of them will be. Maybe. But the teams come from nowhere to be competitive. And then a lot of times they go back to nowhere. And are non-competitive. So, that just irks me to no end. When we do that this time of year. But, speaking of a team that maybe is at that point right now. Let's go to the Buffalo Bills. Let us take a look at Buffalo and whatever disaster that they've gotten themselves into now. All right. So we're moving on to going slow through this, American Brown Ale Burnt Caramel. Let's see how this one is. Interesting picture on here. Let's see how this one goes. So Buffalo, a lot of people got upset, after the games. A lot of times after the games, all right, this one's a little iffy. I think it just doesn't go with the last one. So we'll see. We'll see how this one turns out after a couple more drinks from it. I put out a tweet after the game, basically like, no team is really more all in than Buffalo this year. And, they're about $50 million over the salary cap in 2024. And now they're going to have to probably double down on a pretty crappy, not a crappy team, but a team that probably is not going to get over the hump, right? This is a team whose window really closed a couple of years ago, and they've been trying to chase with this same group, and you're really not getting anywhere with it. And if they couldn't pull it off this year, where everything should have been in their favor, you're probably never going to pull it off. And, I thought they did a terrible job coaching at the end. They coached to not give Kansas City the ball back. They were too far away to do that. And then stuff just broke down. It just turned into chaos. Even if that's your strategy, after the first down is probably a run, Josh Allen's not following that strategy anymore. Throwing in the end zone and then throwing a ball away on third down. It was just asinine. Anyway, triggered a lot of Bills fans. And, a lot of people, start writing, oh, you've got to do this. Why do you need to bring it up? It's I do this for every team. Okay, if I didn't stay awake till the end of the game, or if I wasn't home at the end of the game, okay, maybe I didn't go on there and tweet about, I don't know, whatever team. Houston, maybe. I'm not sure. I don't think I tweeted about Houston. And I'm sure there's a couple other teams. The Rams, that game was late. I went to sleep that night, I think. I didn't tweet about the Rams. But I do it for pretty much every team. At the end of the season, I tweeted about every single team and what their salary cap situation was. So it's not like this is anything different or anything new. This was not rubbing salt in the wounds of the Buffalo Bills fans. All right? That salt that's being rubbed in your wounds is coming from your general manager. With what they've done in the last 2 years with this team. I believe 2 years ago, putting the stuff out, I remembered saying the Bills had the least amount of turnover in the NFL. This year, I know the Bills also had the least amount of roster turnover in the NFL. When you do that, unless you're one of these wacky teams that really does have just all young guys on there, it means you are constantly doubling down on a very aging, similar roster. That's what you're doing. And, the Bills GM, who multiple times I've said should win Executive of the Year. A couple of years ago, I said he was the best general manager in the NFL. And it was last year, meaning 2022, when you saw that panic set in. And one of the worst things that you can do in the NFL is panic. And yeah, there's times when obviously you got to do risky things. You've got to take chances to get better. But if you want to extend that window as best you can, and knowing you've got the second best quarterback in the NFL, that window should be gigantic, unless you do something stupid. All right? You should be looking to extend that window and turn this into a dynasty. Will it be the dynasty that never gets over the hump against Kansas City? I don't know. Maybe it will be. But the minute they signed Von Miller, older player, injury history, and they signed him to this contract that's worth, $20 million a year? Let me just pull up his page. Yeah, $20 million a year at the age of 33. Okay? He had, I'm just taking a look at, his stats here. Missed all of 20. Couple of games in 21, couple of games in 19. Tackle for loss numbers down somewhat. He's still good. I'm not going to say it's like he couldn't play. But, you're looking at his QB hits. I don't have his pressures up right now. I'm not looking those up. Sack numbers, down, from those peak years. And you turn around in a league where more often than not, the older pass rusher is a $10 million a year player, usually available later in free agency because they overvalue themselves and they don't get signed. You go in there and you go $20 million a year. You fully guarantee the 2022 salary on signing. You fully guarantee the 2023 salary on signing. You partially guarantee the 2024 salary. I'm pretty sure that was at signing, right? And then you get another $6 million in injury protection. It's like, what are you doing? Like, you do that, that's just an incredible mistake. All right? And then, you've done that, and you go out there and you say, last year, they go out there and they say, something to the extent of, well, I don't want to be the Rams. So it's not going to be like you've seen in the past. We can't go out there and do some of these things because we've got to be fiscally responsible and, just be smart about the stuff that we do. And then they go out there and they do the same stuff. Sign a couple of free agents, do a couple of extensions, make a trade, bring back some of their same older players, on 1 and 2 year deals. And even when we get into like these extensions that they've done, and this is more 2022, right? Was Diggs, was Milano this year? A lot of those deals where the guys had like 2 years left on their contracts, those were really restructures that were rolled into extensions. Those were situations where the Bills needed cap room. And it was like, well, what is the avenues to cap room? Well, I can throw a bunch of void years on a deal if my rights aren't in there, if they got to agree to it. I don't know if Diggs had those rights or not. He probably wouldn't have agreed to it. They become extensions that are in many ways forced by cap considerations, not forced by anything else. And then, people want to say, well, the Bills were historically injured on defense. Yeah, they had injuries on defense. It doesn't mean that they're going to come back next year and be these great players. The league doesn't work that way. Losing a year to injury, especially when a player's not in like his first or second year, doesn't mean they're going to come back and be as good as they were before. A lot of times it means they're going to be a lot worse. And you look at this Bills roster, and this is, one of the things that, goes nuts. So I said, well, the Bills are $50 million over the cap. And you go, well, Josh Allen's got a $47 million cap number. And you go, I think it was Field Yates put out this tweet. That was like, well, with the click of a pen, they save themselves, I think it's 23.5. Let's see. 23.1. 23.1. It's true. They save themselves $23.1 million at the click of a pen. Okay. That's great. You're still almost $30 million over the cap. And what do you do with all these other players? What do you do with a Stephon Diggs? What do you do with a Von Miller? Diggs looks disinterested. There's $31 million dead to cut him. $27.8 million cap hit on Diggs. You restructure him. His cap number the next year is already $27 million. So if you go and you restructure him, you can save $13 million. And you're going to push a bunch of that money to next year. You're going to make it harder to cut him, harder to move on from him. So let's just pull up their cap calculator. So let's restructure Josh Allen. I'm not gonna get into the whole void thing. That just becomes too difficult here. Let's restructure Deion Dawkins. Let's restructure. You know what? What do we do with Tre'Davious White? Let's cut Tre'Davious White. Let's cut him. And you save more. Nope, I put a post-June 1. Hold on. Pre-June 1. We're going to cut him. We're going to restructure Dawson Knox. We're going to restructure Matt Milano. I'm still $7 million over the cap. I'm going to restructure. Oh, I can't. I'd have to extend Johnson. Same with Morse. Let's cut Douglas, even though he's been decent enough for the team. Let's cut him. All right, now we're $3 million over the cap, or under the cap. Restructure Ed Oliver. I'll restructure Connor McGovern. All right, so here's what I've done. I've restructured Josh Allen, restructured Deion Dawkins, cut Tre'Davious White, restructured Dawson Knox, restructured Matt Milano, cut Rasul Douglas, restructured Ed Oliver, restructured Connor McGovern. I've done all of that. I have $10 million in cap room. Yay. Okay, where am I going next? I can't cut Diggs. I'm going to lose $3 million. I can cut him, all right, but I'm going to lose $3 million in cap space. I can cut Von Miller. I'm going to lose $8 million in cap space. So I have to post June 1 these guys. That doesn't give me any help in free agency. Everybody gets confused by this. In free agency, you carry a player at his cap number. So if I post June 1 Von Miller, I got to take Von Miller at a $24 million cap hit, $23.8 million. I got to take Stephon Diggs 27.8. All right, then I can post June 1 him, and I'll save $19 million. I'll defer, the rest of that money, to the future. But for this year, I've done all of this stuff. All right? Dawkins is going to be 30. Knox will be 28. Milano will be 30 off injury. Oliver, 27. That's fine. McGovern, 27. I can cut Jordan Poyer. Saves another 5. Hardy, another 4. Hines, let's cut him. That's a definite. That saves you 4-6. So now you're up to 15 in cap room. I'll restructure Tyler Bass, right? Save 1-7. Leonard Floyd is his deal is going to go. There's nobody else with cap savings. So I got us to about $16 million in cap room without touching Diggs and Miller. And all you can do with those guys is basically post June 1 them. Or maybe you could cut one, post June 1 the other. That gives you the money to sign your rookies. That's what Buffalo's situation is like. So if Buffalo now wants to go crazy and try to extend this window again, the way that you do that is restructuring Diggs. Which is pretty crazy. It's like wanting to renew. It's like one side wanting to renew their wedding vows when the other side has already served them with divorce papers. Von Miller, that one's just even worse. There's no way they can restructure Von Miller. Just no way. They have to hope he's suspended and voids his guarantee. There's nothing they can do. And both of these guys, decisions have to be made very early. It's not a good situation if you're Buffalo. Their saving grace is they have Josh Allen, right? But and they play in a division that's not very good. But this is a team that's gone as far as they can, and they just refuse to come to grips with reality 2 years ago to say, we've probably got to pull back, scale back for 1 year, focus on the draft, focus on roster building, focus on, getting our cap in order so we can go out there and we can start filling, some of these voids. And they just went in the totally opposite direction. Just terrible. I think with the way that they've done the stuff. And it's like, I don't know how you go from being the best GM in the league to this. But, they've in essence dug their own grave. And they should have seen this coming. Like that's the thing that I don't get. Like, if from a roster standpoint, look, you're always going to get players wrong. Everybody is going to do that. Everybody is going to have players that think are going to be great that stink. Everyone's going to have contracts that think are going to be great. They stink. Everyone's going to have contracts that they think stink. They turn out to be great. Everybody's going to have that. But when you look at it from a team-wide perspective, anybody with half a brain that is not just like got Buffalo Bills goggles on could not look at anything that they've done over the last 2 years and go, that has a good chance of really working out for them. Like, at least with the Rams, now they had to give up a lot for them, right? A 2 and a 3. But at least what the Rams did when they brought in Von Miller was kind of a smart thing, right? You wait to make sure you're in contention. You wait till you're in the middle of a season to where specifically what your needs are. You find somebody from another team that you can bring in that's also looks like he's healthy, having a good year, and all you've got to do is get him through 8 games. And you've got no future commitment to that player. You bring him in for a playoff run. Like, that's the way you do it when you're going to bring in some of these guys who are over a certain age. Not going in and signing someone to essentially a 3-year guaranteed contract. Like, I don't even know why you would do that with a wide receiver at 30. Like, that doesn't make any sense. The wide receiver career arc, like, if you get into the whole concept of roster building, all right? When you talk about these bad football teams trying to build a roster. And obviously, yeah, everything begins with the quarterback, right? But, the other stuff that you want to get into, it's like, if you want to really build something, you need stuff to kind of peak at the right time. Drafting a wide receiver in 2024, but not getting a quarterback until 2026, nothing is going to mesh there. You've wasted your wide receiver's best years. By the time your quarterback's ready to play, your wide receiver's probably on the decline. Okay. You get into the team building, just the general aspects of it. This is not building a sustainable, structure for the future. When I look at this roster and I see these massive cap hits, and at some point this year, this is the age of their top players right now, 28, 31, 35, 30, 29, 28, 30, 28, 32, 30, 27, 27, 33, 27, 27, 28. Okay, so now we're getting into cheaper guys. Like, with those, especially with those kind of cap numbers, like that's not a winning formula. Not even remotely close. I'm going to bring up Kansas City. Kansas City's numbers on top, which are nowhere near as big as Buffalo's. 29, 32, It's all offensive linemen. 27, 35. Kelsey is, to me, looks done, but whatever. 27, 30 for a bust wide receiver. 27, 29. But these cap numbers I'm talking about here, so our cap numbers, all right, I should just pull these up side by side. You know what, I can do that. Hold on. All right, so here are Buffalo's top guys without the ages coming in. Top 10. 47, 27, 23, 16, 16, 14, 12, 12, 11, 9.9, 9.7. That's the top 11 players. I went over those ages. Most of those guys are in their 30s. Top 11 in Kansas City. 57, 26-9, 24-7, 15-4, 14-2-5, 14, 10.97, 4.5, 3.8, 3.2, 2.7. You cannot compare that type of construction. Okay, 32 on an offensive lineman, not great, but it's okay. 35 on a tight end, not good. 30 on the wide receiver, not great, but, he's going to be gone anyway. But 29, 32, 27, 35, 27, 30, 27, 29, 24, 23. I'm hearing a lot of twos. At the beginning. We've got a lot of guys in the 20s. A couple of guys in the 30s. A lot of guys in the 20s. When I'm at Buffalo, let me pull Buffalo's ages back up. '28, it's quarterback. I don't care about that. 31, 35, 30. All right, now that's an offensive lineman. It's okay. 29, 28, 30, 28, 32. Offensive lineman, 30, it's corner. 27, 27, 33, safety. It's too many 30s. And gigantic cap numbers. And this is because a couple of years ago, Kansas City made that decision to not double down, not triple down. It was, we need to move on. And look, you can look at the Tyreek Hill move and say, we'd be a lot better with Tyreek Hill. They probably would be. But they're good enough even without him there. And, with Tyreek Hill, that defense is probably not as good as it is right now. So, now they don't have the same budget that Buffalo probably has. So, again, like the Belichick discussion, maybe some of it is forced on you. But regardless of whether it's forced on you or not, you've built a roster that's sustainable over a longer period of time. Buffalo's built a roster that if they don't win now, shrug your shoulders and say, well, what are they going to do? The other team I'll look at real quick here is the Cowboys. That's the other team. The three teams that really were the playoff teams that were really all in on this season were Miami, Buffalo, and Dallas. But, I think Dallas is the other one we really look at. So Dallas right now is about $20 million over the cap. Do I have their... I don't know if I have their futures guys in. I think I do, but I'm not sure. Off the top of my head, I'm actually not sure on that one. But this is another one where... you look at roster construction here, and you're getting into these things where you're starting to question long-term viability of a team. And this is another reason why it probably wouldn't have made sense to fire the head coach. You've got Prescott at 31, $60 million cap hit, basically. Zach Martin is 34 at 28.5. DeMarcus Lawrence is 32, 20.4. CeeDee Lamb is young as could be. He's going to be 18. He'll get an extension. Diggs got hurt, 26, 15.4. Michael Gallup, 28. He's at 13.85. He's probably going to get cut. Terrence Steele, that's okay, 27. Brandon Cooks, 31 at 10. Iffy. Donovan Wilson's 29. He's at a 7.3. Smith he's a free agent. We won't count that. Parsons, young, 5.4. Trey Lance, young, 5.3. Van Der Esch probably going to get cut, 4.4. He's 28. That's okay, too. So they have a couple of older players here where I think you get worried a little bit with the age. They have enough young guys, I think, who are there. But, some of the ages on that offensive line and the guys who are going to be free agents, I think that's worrisome a little bit. But the most worrisome thing for them is Dak Prescott. $59.45 million cap hit. It's a big number. And I don't know what you do with that if you're Dallas. He's a free agent after this season. He has a no franchise tag provision in his contract, so he can't be tagged. Pretty sure he has a no trade. Not that matters. Dallas is not going to go into next year, and this is the silly talk. So I have an article on this on OTC. This is just the silliness that exists out there where you talk about cutting him. Like, why would you do that? You can have an honest discussion about extending him. There's no discussion about cutting him. That wouldn't make any sense. They don't have another player on the roster. This is a prime example of why you bring in a younger quarterback. Now, some people said Trey Lance. Yeah, maybe that is Trey Lance. I don't have any thoughts on him that are positive, but who knows? I'm going to be wrong all the time. But they have to make some tough decisions on him. Just throwing out crazy articles out there, and PFT, they've gone a little overboard, I think, with some of the stuff, with the speculative stuff. Maybe that's what I should do. If you guys want me to, I can just throw out crazy articles like that all the time. Where it's like one day, it's like Dallas is going to be forced to extend Dak Prescott. They're not forced to extend him. He has a lot of leverage, and I think they will. They're not forced to do it. Then the next day, it's like, well, Buffalo can't do much with Stephon Diggs. Like, they can. Not like they can't do anything. And then it's like, but then they got to make a decision really quick. Yeah, it's true, they do. And then, it's like the Eagles have an option to trade Jalen Hurts. The Chiefs had an option to trade freaking Patrick Mahomes. Bills had an option to trade Josh Allen after 1 year. Like, what are we doing? What are we doing here? The Eagles don't have a secret contract structure to say, well, if he really sucks, we're just going to trade him this year. Like, when they got rid of Carson Wentz, part of the reason was because they felt like they had insurance on the roster in Jalen Hurts, who developed for at least for a year there, and they got to look at him and say, maybe we can play with this guy. They don't really have that right now. With that contract that they have with that option bonus in there, it's not the kind of option bonus that's we're going to trade you option bonus. It's not the option bonus that was in there with Aaron Rodgers with the Green Bay Packers, where it was very clear that's what they were going to do. My daughter is very excited, apparently, because Liv Morgan has returned. I don't know if she won or not tonight. Tonight is the Royal Rumble, for those of you who don't watch wrestling, but maybe know of it. Royal Rumble is usually a lot of fun. Obviously, I'm not watching it, but my daughter must have seen something online. So that's what she was texting me about. She's at a play tonight, so I guess that must have been during intermission. So she's very excited about Liv Morgan returning. So Megan's order of, I think her people that she loves right now, Taylor Swift is far and away number one. Megan has a Kansas City Chiefs hat. We've got a Chiefs blanket. We're big Chiefs fans. We're also Jason Kelce fans, and I can see that. The Jason Kelce is he's what all of us want to be, right? But one of these years I'm going to show up in Sea Isle City. I'll be way too old to be showing up there that early in the morning, but one of these days I should do that. Used to go there all the time when I was younger. The Ocean Drive, that's the place they go to. But I think number 2 on her list is Liv Morgan. She likes a lot of the women wrestlers, but she really likes Liv Morgan. So anyway, I guess she's excited that she's back. So anyway, the Jalen Hurts stuff, that's throwing that stuff out there, which just gets everybody online, going, ridiculous with the stuff. And it becomes a pain because the way I present the dead money is not going to be accurate in that regard. Now, Florio's article in that regard for Hurts was not accurate either. He said it's about 18.3. 18.3 is the net, but that's after you get a credit the following year. The actual dead money would be like 23. They would have to account for the option bonus. They get a credit the following year because they didn't exercise it. But it's like just throwing that stuff out there for the sake of doing it. But the Prescott thing, I think that's an interesting discussion. And I brought that up, and it's a question of, how much cap does Dallas feel they need? Because Dallas should be able to create the space by doing the CeeDee Lamb extension. And Dallas is not a team that goes into free agency and does much. No, I think they should. I think Dallas is at the point where they do have to take risks. I'm not saying you take a risk where you're signing a 33, 34-year-old pass rusher to a $20 million a year contract. But, I mean, by taking a risk, you actually go into free agency and sign a couple of guys for like $12 million a year. Or in their mid-20s, mid to late 20s. You have to, at some point, say, well, what we have isn't working. And make some kind of change fundamentally the way you do business. Let me bring up my article on Prescott here. Basically, what it boils down to here when we get into Dak's numbers. So if they let this contract play out as is, he'll have a $59.45 million cap hit this year. Next year he'll have a $36.46 million cap hit when he becomes a free agent. And you won't really get any compensation for him. You'll get a 3rd round pick a couple years from now. And that's the thing that stings the most, right? Because Russell Wilson brought back a ton. Other guys brought back a lot. So the only way that I think it would make logical sense to extend Dak Prescott, I think, is if you went in there, you did a moderate signing bonus. So he's not going to get much of a raise over what he's already earning this year. Now, he has a lot of leverage, so I don't think he would agree to this. But you would do a deal like that. It would not have a no-trade clause in it. You would basically have something in there that gives him a little bit of a bump in salary. And essentially what you're doing is you're paying to have the right to be able to trade him next year versus losing him as a free agent. I didn't mention this in the article. I thought that was just getting way, 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 way too much into speculation. We can do that on a podcast. It's silly to do, I think, writing it, to just be like, well, this is crazy scenario kind of stuff. But, I think if you were going to consider extending him, for the purpose of the optics of losing him for nothing, extend him this year, but you cannot give him a no trade. And you can't do like an obscene signing bonus of like $80 million. Like Prescott is set to earn, how much this year? 2024. He's set to earn 34. You want to give him an extra 20 million? Make it 54? That's fine. Give yourself a window to where you could trade him in 2025 or 2026. Especially if you do have to make a change at coach. Don't force the quarterback who's, an older, if he's early 30s should be okay for a quarterback. I think he's an older early 30s quarterback. Don't force him on a new head coach. That's probably not fair. But you don't want to just get a 3rd round pick back for him. So I think it's a scenario where you can justify paying him an extra 20 million bucks if you think in turn you can get that first round pick and maybe a second round pick or 2 1s from a desperate team. The things Prescott can still go. I can justify throwing an extra 20 at him. And whatever that salary might be even in 2025 if you want to keep going that way. You can justify that. That's not the way teams work, and I doubt he would do that. So, I think this is more of like one of these where you would say, well, in the ideal world, right? You go to engineering and then, everything is like, well, under the perfect circumstances, and all that nonsense. That the first day you get a job, you're like, oh, well, I guess that stuff isn't really accurate. That's kind of what this discussion is, if you were doing something like that. But that's the way that you kind of protect your investment, I think, a little bit. But, otherwise, I don't want to get into a situation where I'm forced to extend him, by restructuring him to the point where I'm like, man, I'm going to take like a $50 million cap hit if I don't extend him next year. I better just extend him. And then having him be like, no, I'm not going to do it. And you not having the ability to franchise tag him or anything else. Like, that doesn't make sense. So, Dallas's path here is basically do what I mentioned, which is probably not going to happen. I think that's a little too out there. But it's basically, they have to make a decision this year. Are they convinced that Dak Prescott is going to be their guy? If they're convinced that Dak Prescott is going to be their guy, extend him. Take that $34 million he's owed this year, roll it into the guarantee, and don't go down this stupid route of, having zero leverage, next February and March when you're trying to extend him. Like, just do it now. Just get it over with. Get the pain over with. All right? Otherwise, you probably should just let things play out. If you think that this is a capable roster of, winning the championship, just don't do it. Go out there and say, all right, we're putting best foot forward. We're going to give it one last shot. And if it doesn't work, well, the head coach is fired. And we're probably going to make a change at quarterback. And we're probably going to move on from, Zach Martin. We're going to move on from DeMarcus Lawrence. We're looking at 2025 here. Martin's a free agent, actually, at that point. And Dallas held firm on that, right? They gave him a raise this past year, but didn't, extend him. Lawrence, he had taken a pay cut, but Dallas guaranteed it. You look at 2025, you look at the top charges on here, it's $36 million dead for Prescott if he leaves, $13 million dead for Zach Martin if he leaves, $7 million dead for DeMarcus Lawrence if he leaves. That one's probably more of a given. I would think Gallup will be gone before then. I would think Cooks might be gone before then. Essentially what I think what you're doing, if you let these numbers play out, and, obviously these numbers are going to change, right? Like, CeeDee Lamb is going to be on an extension. Parsons will be on his 5th-year option, I think, at that point. But even with those contracts voiding, if they leave things as is, Dallas would probably have $56 million in cap room with an ability to create a little bit more. So, I think if you look at it from that perspective, I think Dallas, should have this eye on, like, okay, 2024 is our last year. Like, this is it. No matter what, this is it with this group. And I'm not going to go crazy with Dak Prescott and, do anything stupid, in the long term. because I'm looking towards my future, and my future might not have Dak Prescott in it. And you can restructure contracts as many times as you need. All right, so if Dallas needs to restructure Prescott, he's got a $29 million base, $5 million roster bonus. If you need some cap room right now, take the $5 million, convert it. Doesn't really add much to the damage in 2025. Save a couple of $1,000,000. If you're actually going to be active in free agency, convert as needed. Convert $9 million, $8 million. Maybe in the summer you got to convert another 10. You do it in increments multiple times over the course of the year if you really need the cap room. Otherwise, leave it be. Just leave the contract as is and be prepared to walk away next year, if you turn the keys over to somebody else and they don't want to have Prescott. I think you want to leave it up to the head coach, or at least have the head coach help steer you in the direction that you want to go. And he has time to do it. You're going to hire a head coach by February. He's got all of February and half of March to work with Prescott on doing a deal if they really want to go in that direction. So, I think it's a real interesting one. I think that, look, if Dallas has to extend him, he's going to make $60 million a year. I don't think that is, I don't think that's a question. I think the price is not a question if they do end up extending him. But, all the other stuff, in my mind, is kind of in Dallas's court if they allow it to be. And they have to make that decision as to what they do. All right, let's get on to our Twitter questions here. All right, let's see. We're moving on to the Royal Standard Wee Heavy Ale. I'm going to see how this is in a minute. I'll put out one last call for podcast questions. One of these days, I will do a live session. We'll do something. I know I've done Twitter Spaces in the past. I'll do something on YouTube. Let's see, putting something together there. Let me just take a look at my email. I know I'd gotten some things from before, and I'm going to end up missing most of those. But I think there was something about Chicago that was maybe just from last week. Yeah, there it is. I'm looking at my phone. Rees? I'm not sure how to pronounce it. You've already said the Bears should draft a quarterback and keep Fields, which I agree with. Hypothetically, if they did go that route, I'm assuming this is a podcast question at least, what were their options for the offseason in 2025? What would they be able to do with Fields, tag and trade, potential trade? Made the argument that even if they could get a second for him before the draft, that opportunity cost worth holding on him as a bridge to see if he finally emerged. So, yeah, I mean, you would basically be tagging him, right? You would be able to go in there and you would be able to franchise tag him. Is what you would do. It would be very similar to, bringing up a old Patriots situation. Going in there when they had Matt Castle that came in for the 1 year when Brady was hurt and played pretty well. They franchise tagged him with no intention of him playing on the franchise tag, right? They basically had him just for the purpose of trading, where they traded him to Kansas City for, I believe it was a second round pick. That's pretty good. So I think that it would be a similar scenario where they would do that. So, what the value would be would probably be pretty dependent on how well or how not well that Fields played. The thing with Castle, which is different, is, Castle played fine, but you had Brady, who now at that point was established, as an MVP level quarterback. He was just established at a very high level. So that would be a little bit different than Fields, because I'm assuming if they tagged him for the purpose of trading him, it would mean he probably didn't have a great year, but not a terrible year. So, I think the upside would probably be a 2 in that scenario. But, I could see that also being a situation where they may look at it and say something along the lines of, we're worried that we're going to get stuck with him at $30 million. So, that's the, that's the only thing with it. So I think that makes it a little hard to, kind of project, just because of that, because, it's hard to say what scenario would there be to where he would play well enough to get tagged to where other teams in the league would still see him as a viable option, but Chicago would say we'd rather turn to the rookie. I'm not sure on that. That's the only thing there. All right. So let's get into our questions on Twitter. Angry Rob has a question here. How many day 2 picks out of 4 are the Commanders going to or should spend on offensive line? What about free agent offensive line? Cosme is the only likely starter that should remain. So, yeah, they need... I don't know why this isn't in my main list of questions. Maybe it'll show up again. I don't know how Twitter does their stuff half the time now. So I think, this probably gets into a lot about team building. So first of all, free agency this year is not great. There's a couple of good guards who are going to be available. I don't think any of them are, with the exception of Zeitler, who's not, I don't think that's the kind of player that Washington's looking for, right? That's more of a playoff team safe bet. There's a couple of guards, but they're not, nothing is, I think, a sure thing. But I think that in general, when you look at building a football team, and again, what I mentioned before about, a lot of guys kind of peaking at the same time. Jake, you want to come say hello? No, Jake is in hiding for that. You sure? No, drink some water. All right. Jake, this is pretty late for you. Yeah? All right. I know, it's Saturday. I know. So, I'll be tired tomorrow. Anyway, the thing is, I think if you want to probably buy into something that can be good for a long period of time and give you some kind of just fundamental base to be okay as a football team, like not be awful, it is probably building that offensive line. And if you can build that offensive line, that actually is one of those units that can give you multiple years in the league, especially if the guys hit, right? Because it's a position where the players last for a longer period of time. It's very different than in other positions. So when you're a team that's completely kind of devoid of offensive line talent and you're just trying to stabilize yourself as a team, I think there's probably a lot to be said out of, trying to find in those middle rounds, your starting guards and centers, starting right tackle, starting guard, starting center. I think I think it's a reasonable choice to say that, okay, out of 4 picks that we have there, we can justify using 2 or even 3, even on offensive linemen. Now obviously there's other things that you might want to do with those picks depending on who's there and, other aspects that you can kind of select players on. But, I think there are reasons why you can justify doing that when there is an absence of other positions. Now, if you're talking about having an opportunity to improve, pass rusher, I'd probably lean pass rusher. Obviously, quarterback but that's more of a, first round kind of target. Wide receiver, could do it. If you're getting a rookie quarterback, I think you could do that with a wide receiver in the second round as well. I think it's reasonable to, to go in there with those round 2, round 3 picks, and use them on, somebody who maybe can play one tackle for you and project to a left side later on. Someone who's maybe projects to be a higher level guard, maybe. Center, now that I'm thinking about it, center is probably a little bit more of a day 3. Even another guard would be a day 3. So it would probably be at the most 2 that you would use. But I think that there's a reasonable, it's a reasonable approach to do that for a team like Washington that is just kind of empty overall, and doesn't have that quarterback in place yet. I kind of like the idea of getting some other parts in place and then trying to fill those other pieces in later on. And I think that I think that that's probably a fair way for them to do it. Captain Buccaneer, how are the Saints going to get under? Same way they do every year. You are going to take every player on that roster, bring them down to the minimum salary, and redo it. Restructure their deal. I did a podcast on them a couple of months ago, I think, where we went through that stuff. It's just bad. It's like they had to redo Winston so they could June 1 him versus having his deal void out. I think they had to pay him an extra $100,000 to do it. I know with Michael Thomas they paid him an extra $200,000. I think Winston's an extra $100,000. I could be wrong, but I think that's what they did. It's you're going to take this roster that's the oldest roster in the league and you're going to double down on it again. And they're just going nowhere. They're just going around in a circle. And they're going to be a team where even if they make it one year, hey, I told you so. If they win a Super Bowl, then it's all worth it. If they don't, it's like, what'd you do? You got a wild card, 9-8. Great. And more power to you. G Black, thoughts on the Texans and Stroud? I think Stroud is really good. Obviously, a lot of promise. It's 1 year. You always wait and see. With the way things work out, I think it looks like the real deal. I thought that in watching him against the Ravens, and I think I definitely made the comment on Twitter, that it was very similar to what the Jets did. They didn't let him have big plays. And without those big plays, I think he was much more limited in what he could do. Now, the game against the Jets was also in bad weather. But I think it was like they didn't let it just become like a wide open game. And I thought that's what the Ravens did. They kind of kept everything in front and made you kind of go with these longer drives. And he really wasn't capable of doing that. He's a rookie. So I think that the step for him is, to kind of get to that point now. Now where you're going to take the off season and you're going to work on, I think probably being a little bit more complete. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that I watch a lot of Houston Texans games. All right. Troy is the guy to ask for that, right? Like I would expect, Troy at Texans cap there to, be sitting there and watching a bunch of Jets games. I don't know why I watch a bunch of Jets games. But it's not like I watched the Texans a whole bunch, but in the bits that I watched of them, when you could get these games that were kind of in that good weather indoor environment where you've just got like a wide open game in front of you, he played incredibly well. And I think the next part of it's just part of the learning process. So I'd be very positive, obviously on his future. And so I think the next step is to see where they develop from here. As a roster, I mean, they still have a lot of work to do. They're still like a piecemeal roster. It's like they're still. It looks to me like they hit on their first two picks, but this is a team that was bad for a long time. They don't have really any kind of core in place other than like those two. And, Collins has been good. I shouldn't say, beyond that. But, they have to do more. They can't keep doing this stuff where every year they have to go and add 30 guys in free agent. 30 guys, maybe not 30, but like 15 guys in free agency just to fill a roster out. KG, are offense and defensive coordinators able to just walk away from a current contract to go to another team? Not really. I don't think that they can't be blocked from a promotion, but I don't believe that they have the ability to just go to another team. I think those have to be mutual decisions. Such as Philadelphia's, right? Like they fired their defensive coordinator. He goes to Miami, or no, I'm sorry, Miami goes to Philadelphia. Is the way that worked out, not the other way around. That's how that is. Philadelphia, that's a hot seat job. Them, the Jets, Dallas, they're all hot seat jobs this next year. But yeah, you have to go to some kind of decision on that. They have to come to some kind of agreement. Jeff in Tokyo, if Kirk Cousins leaves the Vikings in free agency, what are the draft compensation effects? Assuming he gets paid above 30, is it a third, fifth rounder, or a big goose egg? It's going to be either a third or a goose egg at that point. So the quarterbacks don't qualify for that rule that caps you off at a fifth rounder, even though they've been in the league a long time. But you have to be very careful to protect the fact that, he goes to another team. If Cousins didn't get hurt, I think he'd go to another team. I think he's going to be back in Minnesota. General manager's already said, he'd love to keep him. And they've shown zero inkling that they are willing to redo anything with that team. Whether that's on him, whether that's on the owner, I have no idea. But I think Cousins will be back. People's Champ. With the way the Ravens have drafted the past few years, center, safety, traded for linebacker, will teams reconsider draft prioritization? PPA versus best for cap reasons. I don't think teams really consider that in there now. This gets to, a lot of these arguments here. So, you take the Ravens, for example. Now, the Ravens are a team that, that they had obviously a quarterback in place, already with Lamar Jackson. So that kind of changes sometimes the way that you can do stuff. But in general, no. I mean, when you get into the Ravens thing, or you get into Detroit, like a lot of the things are, Detroit got really lampooned for taking a running back and a tight end 1-2. And it's like, yeah, because what you've done is you've left yourself no margin for error. And I don't care who the general manager is. When you want to say, you go in there now, and, I'm kind of pulling for Detroit. But, Detroit, you go in there and you say, Brad Holmes said, no, these guys are just so versatile. They're so special. You can go through the league historically. You will see those things written about 8 million draft picks in the last, 20 years. And about 70 or 80% of the time, those picks help lead to those general managers getting fired. So it leaves you no margin for error, right? It's like the Kyle Pitts thing. Kyle Pitts was supposed to be the unicorn. Kyle Pitts had to be a unicorn because of where you drafted him. Saquon Barkley had to be a unicorn because of where you drafted him. All right? These players, because of where you drafted them, had to be great. Now, you can say that they got it right. And I'll tell you, they got lucky. because, none of the general managers, just like anybody else, are perfect. I look at the Jets as the perfect example. Joe Douglas probably got 70% of his picks wrong, including one of the worst picks of all time in Zach Wilson. Of this new CBA era. But he got Garrett Wilson right, and he got Sauce Gardner right. And, the same hyperbole that was given about Zach Wilson, the same hyperbole that was given about Mekhi Becton and Denzel Mims and Elijah Moore and Vera Tuck has been hurt, Hall, whoever you want to say. It's all the same. Every one of those players, a lot of people are saying that, Denzel Mims was a bad pick. Oh, well, if you saw this guy play in practice, like you would, let me just tell you, you're just going to be shocked. He's got the hands of, I don't know, Jerry Rice. He's got the body of Calvin Johnson. Didn't have any of this stuff, but I'm just talking about the nonsense that people throw out there. You're going to be so surprised. I'm really surprised when I find him glued to the bench after 1 year. So I don't think that's really. I personally I don't think that really changes anything, because again, it's the exception versus the rule. So, I always say in the NFL, there's risks that need to be taken. So if you want to take a risk by drafting a safety, you can go ahead and do it. It's easier to take a risk when you've got certain positions already filled than when you're a completely rebuilding franchise. And even the linebacker trade, where we look at that, part of the reason why they had to make that trade was because they drafted a linebacker that they didn't think was working out. Now, Queen's had a good year for them. They'll probably do pretty well in free agency, right? It's free agent this year, I think. But that's the reason they traded for a linebacker. So it's almost like they used 2 picks to get a linebacker. Would their team have been better if they just didn't take a linebacker? I don't know the answer to that question, but that's just the way to look at it. I don't think that you've got 32 teams. You've got in the ballpark of 256 draft picks to look at every year. Looking at 1 or 2 specific examples that goes against the grain is not really a reason for everybody to do it. It would be like as if you had a miracle team that always went for it on 4th down, and somehow on 4th and 10 converted 60% of the time, and you were like, well, yeah, maybe it makes sense to go on 4th and 10. Maybe it does when you're at the opponent's 38-yard line. But there's other spots where that one's probably not a high probability play. To always do that. So, I think that's just something that you have to look at, and you've got to take the everything into consideration. With those positions and what you do. Nick, not sure if he would, but is it possible to see Bill Belichick take a year off coaching and see what kind of positions are available next year? Some interesting vacancies. Belichick is not taking a year off. Belichick is being forced to take a year off. So I don't think Belichick won't put his name out there next year. I don't know if there's going to be a team that jumps at him. But I don't think this is going to be Belichick picking and choosing. I think this is going to be more along the lines of Belichick having to wait to see if there's a team that's interested in him. I think it's more that. What a fun guy. Why isn't analytics used more on the roster construction side in the NFL? Thomas Dimitrov talks about this quite a bit, but curious for your thoughts. I'll just give a plug real quick. Obviously, they have a terrific podcast that I I'd love to listen to it live. Um, I always miss it when it's not live a lot of times, and it's so dependent on the kid's schedule as to when I get to jump on it. It's a great podcast. He gives it's really cool. So yeah, I'll give a Sumer Sports plug here. Um, it is really cool to get a perspective of someone who has been at that level in the NFL. Um, One of the things that's one of my favorite things that I've gotten to do out of this fun little hobby of over the cap has been through the years getting to meet or talk with, email with general managers and cap people. It just always, it always blows my mind when I get an email from someone um, that runs a team, or that I discuss something with somebody who ends up running a football team. Um, and obviously the cap side of it as well. If it's somebody that's director of football admin and all that stuff, I love it. Like, it is just, to me, that's like a mind blowing thing. You go and meet someone, yeah, we know your website. Screw you for saying this. Kind of stuff. Like, it is. It's really cool because it's like I fall in this weird little grouping. There's probably not a lot of us, but there's some of us where it's like you're not really media. You're not totally a fan. The Jet side of it is more of a fan thing, but it's like you fall somewhere in between. Like, really, you're kind of doing stuff that's very working in the NFL kind of stuff, but not exactly. It's like it's really interesting, to kind of be in that position. But having him go on a podcast, and Eric does a great job, I think, with leading the discussions and getting him to open up about certain things and discuss certain things and all that stuff. I love it. I think it is absolutely great. But I think we don't get into analytic. Look, you barely get into analytics into anything except for like fourth down decision making. Getting into analytics about draft picks when you've got this massive scouting staff and you've got general managers who, for the most part, used to be scouts, and you're trying to tell them, like, okay, yes, you think this guy is an absolute A. Let's look at historically what all these players drafted have been like at this position, in this range. Or, let's take a look back and see, what difference did these players make to the overall impact of an organization? Or, what kind of a bump in value should you be giving to position A, B, C, and D, compared to all these other ones? And it's even just as simple as the charts that I put up every year, where you look at, if we look at the high-end salary scale, percentage of players basically on extensions that are in like the top 10, top 15 at a position versus free agent availability. That absolutely should be playing into your draft picks. If there is a position that I can readily get in free agency, and I know I'm not going to have as long of a time with that player, right? I know that might only be a 2 or 3 year window. But if I can get a linebacker in free agency, and I can't get a pass rusher in free agency, why the hell would I have a linebacker and an edge rusher graded similarly without taking that into account? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Zero. Because there's one position I can go in there and I can get the fifth best linebacker in the league as a free agent. Every year. Every year I can go in there in the draft, in free agency, odds are, and I will get a player that is within $5 million of the top paid player in the league. But if I try to get a pass rusher in free agency, I won't find anyone within $15 million of the top paid pass rusher in the league. You have to take that into account when you give your draft grades. I don't care if this linebacker is a 90, can't miss, and the pass rusher is an 80 with question marks. 80 with question marks is probably more, it has a better chance of making you a better 53-man team than the 90 lock where I can't get an edge rusher in free agency. I'm going to have to go and I'm going to trade away a second round pick to bring in someone like a Montez Sweat or someone like that. Or I'm just not going to find anyone at all. But I think the main reason is we invest so much in scouting, but we don't invest in the other stuff. Whether it is analytics, whether it is salary cap analytics or salary cap management. There's teams that do. All right. But I think that's the main reason why we don't invest in it. It's not like we invest a ton in scouting, but we have a lot of guys. What I mean by we don't invest a ton, like you probably expect them to work for free, close to it. But, I think that's the main reason. And, you see these scouting reports, and I've seen scouting reports before. They come in. And that's basically what it's a lot of it, even at the team level. It's all cookie cutter boilerplate, the same stuff you see on, fluid in the hips, got this. I'll give him a 5 here, this there, this there. It's like, if it was perfect, if you could find me the perfect general manager that has a perfect record of draft picks, say, okay, that guy's on to something. But there aren't any. There's none. So, but I think that's really what it boils down to, is the majority of the front offices in the NFL are built off of scouting. And that will never change. Ever. Andy, any chance Dallas tries to sign Lance to some kind of Jordan Love type deal to protect them in case they can't get a Dak deal done? The only way Dallas would do that is if they somehow thought Lance was great. But I don't think... I think Lance was mainly their emergency quarterback, right? I'd have to look it up, but I feel like he was their third quarterback. So unless I'm wrong about that, I don't think that they would do that. Now, maybe this is some brilliant plot by Dallas to just try and sign him to an extension that's like $8 million a year. As like a high paid backup. But I don't think so. My feeling is he's the third string quarterback, as he's the third best quarterback on the team, which is not a good thing. All right, Mark. I was looking at Jalen Hurts' page. Seems to me when the contract voids, the Eagles should be looking at $97 million charged that year, but it shows several more years of charges. If he were to decide not to extend, what would the cap hit to the Eagles? Man, that's a tough. So what the Eagles have done with Jalen Hurts is they have all these options built into the contract that they can pick up, not pick up, trade away, not trade away. So I believe the way that I wrote this, definitely. So I did this properly. So all these numbers, if you're following along on YouTube, all these numbers that are in other bonus column, starting in 2026, you'll see a 9.9 charge. It'll be 19.88 the next year, 29.81 the next year, and so on. those are all option bonuses that are not guaranteed in the contract. So if the Eagles get to the point where they do, in fact, exercise these options and he gets to 2028, his cap number, if that deal voids out, will be 97.5. So, this is Jalen Hurts' contract is basically like a giant flow chart. If this, then this. If this, then this. It's like choose your own path as to what it'll be. But if it actually played out and got to 2029, it'd be 97.5 million dead if they did not extend him. So this deal is basically set up to do two things: either trade the player. Obviously I'm on the Florio talk now. These numbers are not going to be right on trading on the front end of the contract. They're right on trading when we get to 2026. They're not right for trading in 25 and 24, simply because they have options that are there that I've already thrown into the prorated because they're guaranteed. So basically, it's a contract that's designed to be traded in either 2025. Let me see what the trade is in 26. Yeah, probably a trade in 25 or to extend him. I mean, there's really no middle ground, I think, on that. And I would think the trading possibility in 25 is pretty limited. Eddie, are we going to continue to see void years and upcoming free agent contracts? And give a brief high-level overview of void years. So, void years are basically a mechanism to drive cap charges down. The NFL allows you to prorate money up to 5 years. Most contracts nowadays, with the exception of extensions, don't run 5 years in length. So to get that maximum proration, you throw a dummy year in there, what's called a void year, to park some of those salary cap numbers. I think that'll continue because a lot of times when teams are signing players, you're trying to get that cap hit as low as possible. So I think void years absolutely have a place in the NFL. There was a time when I didn't think they did at all. After seeing the way things played out, I think they do. But I think you just have to be careful with it. You can't get to the point to where everybody is, voiding out at the same time and stuff like that. But basically the high level overview of it is that they're years to park salary cap charges. And if you don't extend the player, you'll have to pay the bill, for that at a later date. You'll get all those charges. Basically, you're buying on credit. That's what it is. You've got this low monthly payment. Maybe it would be similar to, something like an adjustable rate mortgage, right? It's like you've got these low payments early on, but you might end up with a massive number, a bigger jump at some point, unless you restructure your mortgage. And in the case of this, it would be, extending the player contract. Logan, what factors do you or other sites take into consideration when trying to come up with a contract prediction for an upcoming free agent? I've seen some projections for Kirk's contract, and they seem a little low to me. So, usually what you look at are, as best you can, prior comparable players. You adjust that for either salary cap or market growth. And you take into account, injuries and stuff like that. Cousins, Cousins is not a player that to me screams like high level potential. And I think that that's a negative for him. Obviously the Achilles is a negative for him. I still think he's probably going to be your number 1 or number 2 ranked free agent this year if he gets there. But I think his salary level is probably going to be pretty similar to what it's at now. I think he'll probably get 2 years guaranteed. I think that's how it'll work. I think it'll be a 2-year deal, all guaranteed. But I mean that's most of the stuff that you take into consideration. And again, when you do projections on things, you're going to be somewhat right on some players, and you're going to be very wrong on others. What happens? All you can do is take into account what you've seen in the past. And, you can try to take into account somewhat team needs. And for a position like quarterback, you can take that a little bit more into account because there's so few players available and so few teams that are needy. But you can you can look at all those different things, to try to come up with a number. All right, we are moving into our IPA with orange peels here, or Orange Alice. All right, see how this is. This is going to be a very different taste than what I've been drinking, but I think we're on the 5th day of Christmas. I don't know. Just running through these. Okay, that's very good. So I would say this is the best one. And it didn't take any getting used to for, it's a very different than the other couple that I've had. Maybe this is the 4th one. All right, AJ. Jason, can you do a quick dive into Bill's salary cap and how you would go about addressing it, assuming they can't get out of Miller or Diggs this year? So obviously I went into the players that are there before. If it's me, I'm going to cut Von Miller. I'm going to eat that cost. I still have that tab open. I see Jacob I can't believe Jacob is still awake. This is what happens when Dad is the only one home. We let the kids stay up late. He's busy playing Fortnite and very upset about somebody probably shooting him. Talking about hacking. Anyway, Von Miller here. I'm going to lose 8-7. I'm probably going to cut him. Now, I might post June 1 him. Hold him at that number. I'll open up 6-7. That gives me enough to sign my rookies. I think that's probably what I would do there because there's no upside with Von Miller. Like, there is no reason to still have Von Miller on the team. Zero. It was a bad deal. It was a very low chance deal of working, low probability of working, and it came out on the worst possible way that it could. So I think you move on from that. I don't know what you do with Diggs. I don't think Diggs has much trade value. I don't think Diggs is going to be happy there. Now maybe it's different. Maybe whatever we saw didn't look great, but maybe it was fine. Maybe he's really hurt. Whatever it is. In no way, shape, or form am I restructuring this deal because it just makes it harder to cut him the next year. What's his cap hit the next year? 27.4, dead at 22.2. I don't need to make that go higher. So I need to make that decision. Am I either getting rid of him this year, or am I getting rid of him in 2025? I'm not really sure what I would do, in that case, but I wouldn't touch his contract. Let's put it that way. I am not going to create cap room in Diggs' contract for the purpose of signing some guy who makes $6 million a year. I'm just not going to do it. Like it doesn't help you in any way, shape, or form. Jake, how many first-round picks is too many for a rookie quarterback that you're very confident in? I don't like using the confident part because you shouldn't be confident in anything when it comes to that stuff. I think the quarterback is so valuable and the contract is so valuable that I think 2 first-round picks, maybe you could even throw something else in there, I think is worthwhile. And by 2 first-round picks, I'm not talking about one being a pick swap. I'm talking about, 2 future first-round picks being okay to probably throw in there. I think that's okay. Just because you can't come across those players, all the time. Now, that is still a lot to give up, though. But you see, if it hits, it's worthwhile, and it's very hard to hit. Here's the thing. I think you're almost better off in that Bills Chiefs kind of scenario where you're probably giving up one pick and not getting the best prospect in the draft. That's probably better than doing what the Panthers did last year to get the number one overall pick, and kind of go from there. But, I can understand that logic. So, I mean, like last year when the Bears made that trade, when you do the numbers on that, like the Bears make out awesome. Like there's no negative really to what the Bears did. You might say there's some things that you would regret in terms of Fields versus somebody else, because you can't just be pigeonholed into saying, well, you would have taken Young number one. You might have taken Stroud number one. So there might be some stuff that you regret. But in general, if you look at that trade, it's like that is a massacre of Carolina. And if you look at Carolina right now, Carolina looks massacred because their quarterback was so bad. And now you don't have these picks. But the thing with that is, if he does work out, and you cannot close the book on him yet. All right, I know this year was awful if you're a Panthers fan. Next year might be very different. Now after next year, you might be able to close the book on it. But if he plays to the level that you would expect a first round pick to play at, it's a very fair trade that they made, where they're giving up, I think this was giving up a future 1, a future 2, and in his prime, star wide receiver. And I think from their perspective, while I know giving up DJ Moore doesn't look great right now because they don't have those receivers in Carolina, and Moore had a really good season in Chicago. Again, where you talk about playing into that window where you get all these guys to peak at the same time, with Moore and Young, you probably would have only had one peak year potential, and that would have been next year. After that, it probably would have been quarterback, maybe slowly rising, staying steady, wide receiver declining. Probably where Moore was in his career. So Carolina probably doesn't look at that as much as giving up a $20 million receiver. But whatever. I think that you can justify giving up those 2 future ones if you're talking about a guy that is probably considered a top prospect. Like that. If somebody grades out like a Andrew Luck, Trevor Lawrence, I can understand the concept of doing that. Now, I don't think Trevor Lawrence has certainly not been worth that. I don't think Andrew Luck had been worth that either. But guys like Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen, if you end up with that talent level, they would be worth that. And even though again that's a low probability of ending up with that type of player, I think because of the importance of position, I think you could justify doing it when your option is nothing. If your option is another quarterback, I think that's perfectly fine. But if your object is nothing, I think that you can justify giving up those extra picks. But it does leave you no margin for error. Nick Between Drinks, interested in how you price L'Jarius Sneed free agent contract and how much that changes if his season ends tomorrow or in 2 weeks. I think very little changes if it ends now or in 2 weeks. The only thing that would change is if, let's say, in Super Bowl, he has some crazy great game. I'm trying to think of where I have him. So we should be in the premium. I think we'll have free agent rankings at some point this year. I think he's in my top 15. Off the top of my head, I don't remember what number I had him at. But I don't think, unless he ends up as like Super Bowl MVP or something like that, I don't think those numbers are really going to change. Butch, I keep seeing tag and trade Huff as the strategy for the Jets. I can't see this working. The tag is significantly more than the long-term deal he would get APY. If you were his agent, wouldn't you sign ASAP, play on the tag, and either get re-tagged or re-enter free agency in 2025? It's a very interesting decision. So, from the perspective of tag and trade, he was tendered at a second-round level, and there was no interest in him. Now, very rarely do teams get interested in restricted free agents, but I think that if a player was not garnering interest as an RFA, it's hard to say for certain that you could definitely tag and trade the player. Here's the thing with the Jets and Huff, and this is the very hard way to value this player. And I think this is the hard part that I have with him. I think from the Jets' perspective, Huff is going to be looking for and getting somewhere between $20 and like $23 million a year. I think that is the absolute number that he's going to come in at. Sorry, I had Jacob in the background there going crazy about Fortnite or something, and I'm sure he's still going a little nutty about it. The Huff, I think around the league, I don't know if he would be valued at over $15 million. Like, I was watching, who was it that put up? Was it Will? I don't remember who it was that put up, like, basically it was the Bryce Huff highlight tape, right? All his sacks of the year. There's not a lot of defenses that are going to allow him to line up, in that wide alignment, because that's where pretty much everything comes from, to attack the quarterback that way. Like, most of the stuff that he's doing, he's not lining up in any kind of like, standard every down, 4-3 kind of setup or something like that. It's like the wide alignments that are coming in there. That's not something that's run by every team in the league. It's not really run by a lot of teams in the league. The other thing with it, and this is also from the Jets' perspective, the Jets don't use him. Like, if he was a 20-something million dollar player, and my projection on him still comes in at that, because I think the Jets it'd be a PR disaster if they lost him. So you can see our own valuation of him comes in at around 10. Now, why does our valuation come in at $10 million? People are going to say, oh, that doesn't make sense. Most of it is because a lot of your value for a team is availability. And his availability is not much. Not because he's not healthy. It's because they don't play him. He played 42% of the snaps last year. Yes, he had 10 sacks. But he only plays 42% of the time. Which means you need a lot of other players to, pick up those snaps that he's not on the field for. You can't have a guy making $20-something million a year and only playing 40% of the time. Now, did the Jets only have him out there 40% of the time because they thought that might help them get a better deal? Hey, maybe. Probably not. It's probably because there's limitations to his game. Now, the thing is, in free agency, you might find, or you almost always find, a team that says, well, if he can get 10 sacks with the Jets at 40% of the time, imagine what he would be at 80%. And, where I talk about those alignments and stuff like that, there is some teams that don't pay attention to that. But his best fit is probably as a secondary pass rusher on another team. Would they go to $20 million on that? I don't really know. But I don't think they're going to trade a lot for him. You just saw Young go for a 2. You saw Sweat went for the 2. Chase Young went for the late 3. So, yeah, I don't think tag and trade is the option. They may tag him, and the tagging, I think, is to prevent losing him. But I don't think tag and trade is the option. I think it's tag and keep, or let him test free agency. Keep your fingers crossed that that one team doesn't develop, and you can sign him for that $15 million a year. Because he's fine even at that playing time, given that you have a system where he can be effective. He fits in with that. But, otherwise, I think you just let him walk. Salary cap casualties. Can you weigh in? This is also from the People's Champ. Wow, there's a lot of players. I'm already 2 hours and 20 minutes in. This might take me to 3. All right, let's run through them. I'm not even going to look up their cap charges here. Russell Wilson. Yeah, he's gone. Geno Smith, probably on the team. Aaron Jones, good playoff run. I would cut him. My guess is they'll redo his deal again. He'll be back. Joe Mixon, I would say gone. Alvin Kamara, that's when I probably need to look at the numbers a little closer. Hello, Megan. Megan has returned.
I'm bored.
You want to join in on the podcast?
Mommy was very complaining because we couldn't fit in the road of all the cars.
Oh, so there were complaints at the play they went to tonight.
No.
No.
On the drive home.
On the drive home.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Megan. So, this has been Megan's first appearance on the podcast since Megan was probably like 4 and Bryce used to do the podcast with me. It's been a while. All right. Alvin Kamara. I have to look at the Saints salary cap situation. Let me see what he's at here. Alvin Kamara. That's great, Megan. A nice hairspray
That's the back
thing.
of it. Hi, Jacob. Jacob, say hi.
All right, let's see. All right, let's see. We've had enough guest appearances tonight. They would gain 1.5 by cutting him. They'd gain 8 by restructuring. I'm actually going to lean towards a restructure on that. I think Nick Chubb will be cut, even though I know they said they want him back. By saying that he'd be cut, I'll include a pay cut in there because that's the only way he'll be back. Keenan Allen, Mike Williams. Mike Williams is gone. Keenan Allen is a possibility gone. I'm gonna guess. Maybe an extension on Keenan Allen. God, that seems so short-sighted, but they'll do something there. Hopkins, I'm going to say, is going to stay, maybe traded. I think Amari Cooper will stay. They'll do something with his deal. Godwin, let's see, what Chris Godwin's numbers here. See, I think that they're going to be a little wise with the stuff. Well, $27 million, they say. No, he'll be on the team next year. Tyler Lockett, I'm going to say trade. Deontay Johnson. It's Pittsburgh. He'll probably be there. Valdez Scantling, I mean, that's a joke, right? Like, he's going to be gone. Gallup probably gone. Darren Waller will probably be on the team, but I could see justification for, getting rid of him. All right. Megan is very happy about this sweatshirt. Rico 2417. Would it be hard to tag and trade Huff? If so, why? So I just mentioned that. Just to reiterate, it's the fact that you need to find a team that sees him as far more valuable than you do, right? And it's gets to the point that Butchie, I think that's who asked the question before. Yeah, Butch. Before, like, if you were Huff and you got tagged and that tag value's at like 23, 20, 24, 25, whatever the tag number is at, why wouldn't you just sign it? And once you sign it, yeah, you can get traded at that number. But if another team doesn't see you, as being worth an extension somewhere in that ballpark, like, they're not going to trade for you. So I think that's all kind of the stuff that you have to factor in here. Dreadful. What do you think it'll cost the Jets to get David Bakhtiari, trade, comp, or free agent deal if he's cut? Since GM Aaron is definitely going to make that decision if he becomes available. I would guess that Bakhtiari would look for a deal that was very similar to the one the Jets got fleeced on by Brown, where the Jets got desperate. Brown was, 2 years, 10 a year, basically fully guaranteed. Bakhtiari is always hurt. I know, I'm sure he's a good drinking buddy, and I'm sure he can go to a hockey game in the off season and chug some beers on the screen and everyone will go crazy. Dwayne Brown was 10 a year, 9 fully guaranteed, but they ended up going into that second year on it. I mean, they could do something like that, probably. I don't know. I'd stay away from that. And I know Aaron's going to run the show. But, you got to be... You've got to... The Jets have to do stuff that is in their best interest for the future. Now, if you want to sign David Bakhtiari and tell Aaron Rodgers, look, we're drafting a quarterback this year. But we'll sign Bakhtiari to make you happy. And, we're going to see what happens with the draft picks, and see the way things shake this year. That's perfectly fine. But, do not let Aaron Rodgers run your team. I would not be confident in him playing any more than one season. Yes, Megan, what do you have to add here? Do you even know who Bakhtiari is?
No.
Do you know who Aaron Rodgers is?
Yes.
Okay, good. Oh, okay. So let's see. So, Liv Morgan has returned,
yes.
and Bailey has won. Bailey has won the Royal Rumble.
And then Logan Paul still won it.
And Logan Paul has won.
That person's back.
Okay. What else happened? How about the Wise Man? What happened with the Wise Man?
And then whoever that is.
Okay, but what about the Wise Man?
I don't know. She's not telling me.
No, you don't know. Okay. So Megan is keeping me updated on the Royal Rumble here, at least on the Women's Royal Rumble, and
That's
with
all we
Logan
have
Paul.
So far.
All right, we'll check it out in a little bit.
Because the Men's Royal Rumble match is just starting.
Thank you, Megan. So.
And they had us guess who was going to leave. It's the Royal Rumble Undisputed Champion. Most people think Roman Reigns is going to win.
All right.
The Rock should come and wrestle on there.
All right. So, if you were looking for some wrestling news, Megan's got you covered. So, there we go.
When do they come to New Jersey?
I don't know, Megan, but we're not going. So, we'll see. All right. Anyway, back to these questions here. Aaron Reeder Barton. Can you explain how a retirement affects the cap if that player retires before the contract expires? Like a pre-June 1 cut, or does the team save all that cap space? So, basically, it's the same as a player being cut. The only difference that is here is Sorry, Megan, showing me some pictures. Good night, Megan. So the main difference here is that when the players do retire, more often than not, the players will be willing to work with the teams for the salary cap. So using Jason Kelsey as an example, his contract is structured. Basically, his contract is. He's going to retire. Yes, Megan.
Taylor's going to be at the game tomorrow.
Yes, Taylor Swift will be at the game tomorrow. I'm so excited about that. Right. You going to wear your Chiefs hat and Chiefs blanket for that game?
Yeah, you know who they should invite next? Who? Wyatt Kelsey.
Wyatt Kelsey. There we go.
Best daughter.
All right. Good night, Megan.
I don't want to go to bed.
All right. Well, you can go do something else. All right. So, anyway. Now his contract is designed to be a June 1 retirement. But basically what happens in most of the cases for these players, the team will restructure their deal if the player is going to retire to where they'll take their base salary, their paragraph 5 salary. They'll bring it down to the minimum that's available for a player. And they'll tell them to hold off on filing all those retirement papers until June 2nd. So basically, if a player says he's going to retire, I would anticipate that his contract will be modified, if it hasn't been already, to where he'll have a minimum paragraph 5 salary. And then they will officially put the player on the retired list on June 2nd. So I would look at it as a June 1 cut is really what the number will be for a retirement. Colin, can you please compare the effects of analytics and scouting department's impact on the draft process? Are they both more effective in later rounds? Do you think analytics does a better job of identifying busts and scouting a better job of identifying potential stars? That's a good question. All right, let's grab another drink before we dive into this one. All right. So I believe that scouting certainly does a better job of identifying potential stars. I don't think that we're at the point yet where we can look at different combine measurables and different things maybe within the college tape that identify stars. I got the interesting stuff going on here. What do you have to say, Jacob, besides that? All right, welcome to my world, ladies and gentlemen. There we go. That's what happens when you get the two kids around at the same time. Okay, Megan. Thank you. Good night. So anyway, I think that here I come. This is why I don't record upstairs. So anyway, I think that in general, when we look at the stuff that we do with our draft analytics, like what Brad and I did and everything else, everything is really based on scouting grades, right? It's all based on who we've identified as talent that belongs in the first round, second round, third round, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, or undrafteds. That is all done essentially through the scouting process. There are certain areas where probably analytics can do some of that, where you're looking at college numbers. I think that aspect of it is probably a little bit more of, in many ways, working within what the scouts have determined are kind of first, second, third round graded players, and maybe moving those players within the ranks based on certain things that you see. And there may be other areas as well where there's some stuff where you can look at certain kind of college statistics, college numbers, or different types of stuff to maybe try to identify certain things with certain players. But I think that the I I personally think that the ideal way, and I think everything really should be married between the two things. Like that's the thing that gets to me the most. But I think it is, you let the scouts who probably understand a little bit better some of the things that you can look at without having to have some kind of numerical quantity to something. And there might be a way to do that, but I think the scouts do a pretty good job of saying, okay, this guy has the talent of a first round player. Because if we grade those drafts, while we say we overvalue a first round pick, that's true. But on average, a first round pick is better than a second round pick, is better than a third, is better than a fourth, is better than a fifth. And that's all through scouting. So the scouts do the job of identifying, for the most part, who are the good players and who are the not as good players in the draft. I don't want to say anyone's a bad player, but I think what they can't do is they haven't been able to determine what makes a player a bust. I think analytics can definitely play a role, probably a little bit more in that. I think there are certain traits that you can go back and look at. I'm not saying that I do that, but in general, I think there are certain traits that you can go back and you can look at and say, okay, this is maybe a warning, like a warning sign. This is a red flag for these 5 players that we have graded as first round talents or second round talents. I think you can probably do that, with that kind of stuff. And I think when it comes to building that 53-man roster and building that roster that peaks together, that to me is all analytics. Like, that's looking at player availability in free agency. That's looking at historical trends of a position in the draft. Where we've all agreed that the teams have given this player a first round grade, second round grade, third round grade, whatever that position is, but only 9% of those players have worked out. So there is a disconnect in the grade that's being given by scouts, that are maybe not first round, let's say second, third round edge rushers. I'm just making that up. That's not a factual statement that I know of, at least. I'm just throwing it out there. But, if we look at that and we say, or whatever the numbers might be, let's say it's 20%, 30%, that means that overall there is something that the scouts are missing in the process as it relates to that specific position. And, we might want to downgrade because of that, or look closer at the scouts' grade and say, okay, well, what with all of these players, what with those 70% of the players that busted, what were the traits that applied to those players that were missing here? So I think it is, ultimately, it's really a blend of the two things. Bob, what's the name of your podcast? Over the Cap Podcast. There you go. Brian. All right, let's see. We're going to open up here our Galactica Denk Nebula West Coast IPA. All right, let's see. I know AV isn't one of your metrics, but I found it noteworthy that PFR's most valuable seasons were mostly held by running backs rather than quarterbacks. Would you be able to give a reason why standout running back seasons might be considered more valuable than standout quarterback seasons? I have no idea. So I've built draft charts in the past, like way in the past, on AV. We even had a team that was curious about that. I don't know why that would be. I mean, if you go historically back where teams were built kind of around that running game, I guess I could kind of see the logic in that. I can't imagine that that's anything recent because I think a lot of their AV, I thought at least, was built on the investments that teams put into the position, and I thought that that was somewhat financial. I'm not really sure why that would be because there is no reason why a standout running back should be more valuable than a standout quarterback. I mean, even just on the basis of, how many yards a quarterback, can give you versus what a running back gives you. Like, I just can't even, I couldn't even wrap my head around that. The value of a passing play, you just think logically, even if our yards per attempt is, say, 6, that's going to be more valuable than any running back. No running back is going to give you 6 yards per touch. 7 yards per touch, something like that. And a quarterback is going to do that. So, I mean, I don't know what the logic would be on that other than there was an era where you had more reliance on the running game. Chris, what is the worst contract in the NFL right now? Ooh, boy. That is a tough one. That's a tough one. I mean, that Von Miller deal is awful. Let's go position by position. All right, let's see. Russell Wilson and Deshaun Watson's deals are terrible. I think Jonathan Taylor's is going to prove to be terrible, but whatever. Wide receiver. I mean, Diggs's isn't great. I wouldn't say it's terrible. Tight end. I mean, Waller's is a trade-in, so I mean, that's not terrible. Left tackle. I mean, Bakhtiari's is pretty bad. Guard is fine. Center's fine. Right tackle's pretty much fine. I mean, you don't really get really bad deals on the offensive line. Defensive tackle deals are all pretty much okay. Edge rushers. I mean, Joey Bosa. So, Seth Walder, I think, was the one that put it out there about, I think he went on the site, was just posting all the Chargers cap numbers. And, I mentioned to him, I can't say Joey Bosa deal at this point. I can't say it's a bad deal, but there should be a lot more talk going on right now about Joey Bosa being released or traded next year. There really should be. He's never healthy, so I don't know why that's not more of a discussion point. Let's see, linebacker. I wouldn't put any of these as like a worse deal. Jamal Adams' contract's awful. I don't think I'd put any of those corner contracts as awful. So, I mean, basically what you're doing is you're looking at Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson, and Jamal Adams. I mean, it's probably those three. I think Russell Wilson, man, I don't know. Deshaun Watson, you know what? No, I'm going to say Deshaun Watson because both were bad trades. Deshaun Watson, I mean, it was essentially a 1-year, $100 million fully guaranteed extension. So Deshaun Watson's is the worst in the NFL. that's the one that I'm going to give the nod to. So yeah, I was going to say Wilson at first, but that's what it is. All right, 13 more questions. Here we go. Steven, could Bill just because at DC for 1 year, just to prove he's not a curmudgeon? No. So if you're saying could he be a defensive coordinator for 1 year? No. No. He did no way, shape, or form is he going to be a defensive coordinator. He might go and work on ESPN for a year. But yeah, no, I don't see that happening. Marvin, what's the name of the podcast? Over the Cat Podcast. Peter, is Die Hard a Christmas movie? No, I do not look at Die Hard as a Christmas movie. I don't know why that's the question being asked. I know people always ask that all the time. Not to me, but just in general. I don't consider that a Christmas movie. I consider a Christmas movie something remotely about Christmas. So no, I don't think so. William, Jason, would love to know how the Dolphins will be able to tag and trade Christian Wilkins. Their cap is tricky. I'd have to look a little closer at Miami's situation with what they do. I don't think they're going to look to tag and trade. I think their question is going to be more of like, do they extend or not? Let's see their calculator. This is a team that'll double down. So their calculator, I'd probably have to actually make a contract up for Tua because he's probably going to get extended. All right, so let's restructure Hill. Restructure Ramsey. That gets us, we're still 21 over. Restructure Chubb. Probably should cut Howard, but let's restructure. All right, so I have no idea how this is going to work out, but my computer just crashed. So I either just lost a 3-hour, give or take a little bit, podcast, which we'll see about, I guess, tomorrow. Or I'll try to salvage it. So sorry if this is going to be kind of weird in between with the stuff. So hopefully, I think I was able to salvage most of the audio. I don't know about the video. So I'll see. I may just end up putting a video without the screen in there. So I was talking about the Miami Dolphins here with some of the stuff they could do, I think. And that's what froze me up here. So I think it's restructuring Hill, restructuring Ramsey, restructuring Chubb, restructure Howard. All right, so I could save 17 on Tua, which I'm not going to get to. So that's 23. Terran Armstead's going to end up being a post-June 1. Simply because he's hurt. Now, he's going to get his guarantee. So I think that'll still be factored in there. Because that's probably what they'll bring his salary down to. Oh, but it's going to be cut. Baker, let's just say cut. All right, so that gets the Dolphins to about 38 million. So I mean that's enough room to be able to tag and try to trade him. But yeah, I mean Miami's going to be one of these teams that probably has to double, triple down on just about everybody. So it's not going to be good for them. I mean this was really the year for them. Unless Tua takes a gigantic leap next year, this was really a year for them. And, it was a bad matchup, bad weather. The losing to the Bills really killed them. But they probably weren't ready to compete to the next level anyway. All right. Steven, if you were the... nope, sorry. Nope, same thing. If you were the Dolphins, what would you do and why? I mean, all the way down to who would you cut, extend. Have you visited any national parks you would recommend? No. I have no recommendations on that. I don't even have a lot of recommendations on the Dolphins. I would cut Howard. I'd probably keep Ramsey as is, even though that looks awful. Keep Hill as is. Restructure Chubb. Let's see if I cut Howard. Yeah, that gets me 13. Oh no, that's still on restructuring Hill. I gotta cancel those out. Let's see. Maybe you have to do those. For some reason, I can't seem to cancel them out. There we go. I think I can get to about 13. I think I'm not touching anybody on that team. And I'm not extending Tua. I'm just not going to do it. Like, I don't think that upside is there. Bears emoji. If Eddie Jackson's contract is too expensive for the Bears, why can't they just cut and re-sign him to a cheaper deal or change the existing deal? So, in many cases like that one, what happens is the player is not happy that they're being asked to take a pay cut. So, oftentimes they would rather leave the team, end up making less money, than sticking with the team and taking a pay cut. They'll test the market, find out the market is less, but they won't go back. It's almost like that's that going back is not a positive at that point. Nick, when looking at cap hits for a team, Jaguars in particular, how can we estimate restructuring? What is Ridley actually worth? So if you want to estimate restructuring, I mean, just look at their base salary. So if you go to OTC, all right, now I'll just pull it up here. So let's go to, let's see, let's go to the Jaguars here. That's the one you asked about. For some reason, I am taking the long way there, but let's go to the Jaguars. Where are they? Jaguars, where are you? There you go. All right, so you go to the Jaguars. So the first thing that you could do is simply go to our menu in the dead money and cap savings, go to restructure. And that will show you exactly how much money could be saved by restructuring the player's contract, which is taking their paragraph 5, their base salary, their roster bonuses that you see listed, their workout bonuses, maybe their other bonuses, and restructuring them, basically converting those to a prorated bonus over the existing years of the contract. And that'll give you a quick number as to how much money that you can probably save against salary cap. The other way that you can do it, let's see if we have that. So the extension option, I believe the extension option, and I'm not 100% sure on this, is if we take their salary and it would be the equivalent of just adding void years in there. Like, we're not giving them extra money. We're just prorating this out over 5 versus the existing term of the deal. I think that's what this does. But if not, I mean, you could take the base salary, roster bonuses that are listed, workout bonuses that are listed, multiply that by 4, divide it by 5. that's the amount of money you would take off the cap if you add those void years in there to get the maximum savings. So that's the way that you can estimate it. Ridley is, he's another one I have a value on. Probably like 15 to 17. It's probably where he's at. 1912, looking to the past 3 to 5 years, rank your top 3 teams in terms of handling contracts, cap space, draft picks, winning your bottom 3 teams. Most efficient, least efficient. All right, let's take a look here. I'm going to just open up my cap room page. So I think the teams that have been the best run in the last couple of years are probably the Chiefs. I'm not giving you these in order. I'll just give you 3 teams. I think the Chiefs are one of the best run teams. I think the Eagles are a very well-run team. Oh, man. This is a tough one. So, it's either the Lions or the 49ers. See, the Lions have a weird situation because of the Jared Goff thing. But that kind of has to factor into it, right? So, probably going to go Lions on that. Worst run. Your worst run teams, Saints, I mean, by far. I mean, I don't even think that there's a question in this, right? They traded an extra first round pick to take that tackle, a couple years ago, 2 years ago. And all the salary cap stuff. So I think the Saints are the worst run. Chargers are number 2. And I don't think the Chargers are last 3 years, the Chargers have to be up there. That they were one of those teams that just went all in on this old roster. Arizona, you know what? I'm going to take that out. So the Saints would be number 1. I think your next 2 teams are the Cardinals, just terribly run, and Washington. Washington, they have the most cap room in the NFL next year. That's just basically out of stupidity. It's not really out of anything else that they did. So I think those would probably be my bottom 3 that I would go with. What is the one position that you would hit the reroll button on every year if you were the GM? I would say outside linebacker. Gosh, I don't know what that would be. If we're talking about youth, it's quarterback. You take as many shots as you can at that position. If we're just talking in general, I'd probably say corner. Excuse me. I think corner is that position that is, fluctuates a lot. So I'd rather just have like a lot of really good corners, and just keep assuming that, one guy is probably not going to play as good. Another guy will be great. And just go from there. John, do you see the Players Association making a push for higher cap based on the fact college players can now be paid incredibly high amounts of money for staying in school, not high school? Or does the PA prefer players stay in college because it helps veterans keep their jobs? I don't think they give that. I don't think they care one bit about that latter part that you said. No, they're the whole CBA is based on revenue sharing, from NFL revenue, which has nothing to do with college. Quite frankly, if you are a good college player, I can't imagine, with the exception of running back, that you're going to make enough money to where you would make that decision to be like, I'll stay in college and not go to the NFL. And the only reason I mention it for running back is just because there's no second contract to get to. Every other position has a second contract. Running back doesn't. So I could see, logic in that. All right, Vin. What should the Jets do about Bryce Huff? Is JFM a cap casualty? Possibility? Does Mosley finally get forced to take a pay cut? I don't know what you do about Huff. I think the Huff decision is very, very, very difficult because from a public relations perspective, it would be a nightmare to lose him. From an on-field perspective, you cannot pay $20 million a year to a guy that you only throw on the field 40% of the time. You can't do it. So, given that the Jets didn't play him more last year, I can't see a situation where it makes sense to, pay him at that level. So, I'm just going to say that if that's your viewpoint of it, you probably should let him walk. I think John Franklin Myers, I think there's an outside chance he could be a cap casualty. I think he made Nick's list. I would say he's probably more of a restructure possibility. I thought he played pretty well this year. Let me see. He didn't get as many personal foul calls, I think. Let me look up what I had his valuation at. I'm going to guess. Oh, it's a lot lower than I thought. 6'6". So he's 55% of the play time. Sacks, average-ish. I don't know. I would say the eye test would tell me, he was okay. My own little metric says not great. I would guess there's a chance of a pay cut more than anything else in there. But I would say that's what it is. Does Mosley finally get forced to take a pay cut? I don't know. I don't know why they didn't do it last year. So I would guess maybe he'll take one. I'm going to guess the Jets will kind of bring it out there as taking one for the team. But I don't know. He didn't do it last year, so I'm going to say no. I don't think the Jets are going to force the situation. Last question. Philip, can you discuss the Cowboys' Dak Prescott dilemma? So I kind of went over it before. But I think it's basically just a question of, do you extend him or don't you? If you've already decided in your mind, if you're Jerry, this is my quarterback for the next 3 years, well, then just extend him. Don't waste the time. Otherwise, I would just let it play out and see where the chips fall after that. All right, so that should do it for me. So I'm going to see if I can piece this podcast together. Hopefully it works, because that would stink to lose, 3 hours of podcasting here. Hopefully I will be back next week. Do another one of these. Will not be as long as this, since it's 1 week versus 3 weeks off. But we'll see what happens. So thank you for listening. Pour one out for Nelly here one last time. Everybody have a great week, and I will hopefully talk to you all again soon.